I view DeepSeek as allies. I see them as on Team Open. Some of the best funded companies in the space are actively lobbying for regulatory capture. There's a bunch of that during the Biden administration, the tail end of the Biden administration, where it was clear that like they were going to work with essentially OpenAI and Anthropic. Essentially, that's it. To build this kind of de facto government sanctioned monopoly that's been blown wide open by Trump's election. But you still have, day 2 of Trump's administration, Sam Altman, closed AI guy up there, talking about building Stargate for OpenAI only. What?
Welcome to the Business Bitcoinization Show, the show dedicated to helping you enrich your life and grow your business with Bitcoin, the hardest money on planet Earth. I'm your host, Josh Friedemann, and our guest today is Christopher David, who is the founder of OpenAgents. Today on the show, we're talking about DeepSeek, Stargate, and why Christopher believes that open protocols are the future of AI. We're going to get to our interview with Christopher right after this. Business owners, unlock the benefits Bitcoin has to offer your business with the Bitcoin for Business Quick Start Guide. This 27-page guide highlights the 6 ways you can grow your business with Bitcoin. Check it out in the show notes. Christopher, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me.
So I like to start off every single interview with a few questions that help us to get to know you a little bit better and to give us some insight for our own lives. So you ready for these?
Yeah.
Question number 1 is this: when and how did you first learn about Bitcoin?
This was 2011. No, I don't have a massive stack from those days. But one of my political Ron Paul friends mentioned Bitcoin kind of in the context of the Fed, alternative monetary systems and stuff. Like, hey, check out Bitcoin. And that was after Bitcoin had first run up to $30 in price. And I was relating it to it mostly as a thing to invest. And I was like, do you think the price will keep going up? He's like, eventually. So I bought a bunch at 30. It crashed down to 2. I'm like, screw this. And then, a couple years later, oh, wait a second, it's above 200. Sold it, made a 5X, felt cool. But, started doing more research from there as kind of this potential alternative monetary system. Later on, realizing it could be used also as a substrate for decentralized applications, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
So follow-up question there. It sounds like you came into it more on the, I don't want to say political side, but from that arena, the libertarian side, than from the technology side. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's cool. But it seems like you figured out the benefit on the technological side as well.
Yeah, I'm a developer. And so I've always been wanting to build applications. My kind of journey, starting with Bitcoin, being attracted to what I now call shitcoins. Forgive my French, but the non-Bitcoin things, because apparently they would be good for creating decentralized applications. It turns out that they've only been really good for scams, parting people from their money. But have come back to Bitcoin recently, realizing that this is where all of the serious entrepreneurial activity is migrating to.
Question number 2 is this: what's an insight or fact about Bitcoin you wish everyone understood?
Probably increasingly important these days, as there's going to be a lot of talk about crypto and digital assets, is there really is and needs to be a clear boundary between Bitcoin, the first invention of digital scarcity that by definition can never be reproduced, and all of the knockoffs of people claiming to do all sorts of other things, where everything else is kind of a technology. And there's going to be lots of debates about this as this now gets a debate at what the U.S. government is going to do in terms of building reserves and things like this. And my kind of observation I would leave people with is that the so-called toxic Bitcoin maximalists, of which I identify myself as, I limit my toxicity to Twitter. I'm otherwise kind of nice. Sure. But that sort of strict defense of Bitcoin only is a really important defense mechanism for Bitcoin to not get watered down or polluted by very well-funded organizations trying to co-opt or hijack or distract or lie about Bitcoin for their own motives. Fortunately, I think all of that stuff has been and increasingly will continue to go to zero against Bitcoin, but there's going to be a lot of noise between now and then, particularly as everyone kind of is fighting for recognition by the federal government as legitimacy. So we'll see what happens, but you don't have to care about or pretend to care about crypto or digital assets. It's okay to be Bitcoin only.
Good to hear. So question number 3, what's the Bitcoin resource you must recommend to other people?
I think the body of work from Saifedean Ammous is probably what everyone recommends, but it is that good. Bitcoin Standard. It's okay to not get through all of it. It's very like kind of somewhat dense economic writing, but as like a philosophical underpinning, as well as the kind of parallel book Fiat Standard that goes into kind of the call it the evils of the fiat central banking based system. These really are the stakes. And my favorite quote from Saifedean that I retweet often to my earlier point is that, Bitcoiners and shitcoiners, we're not on the same team. Bitcoiners are trying to end the evils of central banking and money printing. The other people are basically trying to recreate it to such that they benefit. So the big innovation of Bitcoin is that it can provide this alternative financial and monetary unit, financial and monetary system. And then on top of that, we can build a lot of beneficial things for humanity.
Question number 4, beyond Bitcoin, what is a resource, tool, or idea that's been helpful to you or your work recently?
I'd say an idea, and that is kind of a twofold. It's both open source as well as interoperability. And this is adding real value to my business because I am leading an open source company, a company building on open source. It lends itself to interoperability. So there are other companies building in the same space, kind of building at the intersection of Bitcoin and AI. And because we're building on the same kind of underlying neutral protocol, which is Bitcoin, we're using the layer 2 for payments above that called Lightning. We're more or less also using the kind of decentralized data protocol that works well adjacent to Bitcoin called Nostr for sort of like decentralized data. Being able to build on top of that things that are more specific to our businesses like agents, frameworks for agents on top of that substrate, everyone kind of wants to speak the same language. So we're not competing. There are other companies that are doing other things in the space and that we are allies. So it's a value add. And if you look outside the Bitcoin space to two areas, you look at Silicon Valley, where there's almost no incentive to cooperate. Everyone just wants to chase and get the golden ring and kind of a zero-sum game in a lot of respects, as well as in the crypto space where everyone's kind of got either their own token or their own roll-up. There's all these kind of like siloed ecosystem that not only don't have incentive to cooperate, they have incentive to really push their token or whatever it is at the expense of everyone else. It does not lend itself to interoperability. The Bitcoin does. And I think over the next year or two, you're going to start to see that interoperability based on neutral protocols be a real competitive advantage for businesses. I can see how that's starting to benefit my own business. I think particularly once we start getting some real revenue flowing through and we're able to kind of help magnetize and share that with other businesses, there's a lot of kind of win-win mutual back scratching that can be done. I think it's going to be a massive competitive advantage over the people that are building in private.
Yeah. I want to follow up with you in a little bit more about that, because I'd be interested to hear kind of some of those trends that you're seeing. But for right now, let's get to our final question. We call it our arbitrary but insightful question. And it's this: as a general life principle, is it better to ask why or why not?
I love both of those. And if I had to pick, I would probably go with why, because why gets to first principles. And I think that has to be the start of any inquiry. Like, why do I need your expensive agent framework? Why do I need your crypto coin? Why do I need why? You follow the whys and you can get to a really interesting, beautiful place called, I actually don't need all of the inherited debt and bad ideas of everybody else. Let me start from the beginning, the first principles. And then the why not would come into place where it's like, oh my man, like I'm going to be facing some headwinds or regulators or people who don't want me to do this or whomever that is. And then if there's a wall that you need to blast through, that's like a kind of a why not energy. But why comes first?
Today's episode of Business Bitcoinization is proudly brought to you by Velis Commerce, where the future of business technology meets Bitcoin. As we journey through the era of Bitcoin and its transformational impact on businesses, there's one name that stands out: Velis Commerce. Whether you're looking to build a cutting-edge website, a seamless mobile app, or custom software, Velis is your go-to team. They've been diving deep into the world of Bitcoin since 2014, making them one of the most experienced groups for integrating Bitcoin and Lightning payments into a variety of digital platforms. But here's what truly sets them apart. Velis Commerce doesn't just build. They bring a wealth of knowledge to ensure your project's success from day one. Their team understands the nuances of Bitcoin, ensuring that your business stays ahead of the curve. And for all business Bitcoinization listeners out there, Velis Commerce is offering a free consultation to kickstart your project the right way. So if you're ready to future-proof your business in the coming age of hyper-Bitcoinization, head over to veliscommerce.com or reach out on Twitter at veliscommerce. Let's make sure your business thrives in the Bitcoin era. If you were hit by a bus right now, could your family access your Bitcoin? When's the right time to stop hodling and use Bitcoin to impact your family's lives, not just yours? What if Bitcoin doesn't reach the value you expect, or it takes longer to reach that value? Do you have a plan? Do you have the proper trust structure to avoid probate, maintain your privacy, and minimize taxes? Do you want to avoid taxes to stack more sats or leverage your stack without selling? Should you add Bitcoin to your business's balance sheet? Are you truly confident in your self-custody setup? If any of those questions made you stop and think, you probably realize that simply buying and holding Bitcoin is not a complete financial plan. That's where Strong Wealth comes in. Orange-pilled advisors blending traditional financial planning with deep Bitcoin expertise, giving you the best of both worlds, so you can sleep peacefully knowing you're making the right moves for your family no matter what happens. Schedule a free call at strongwealth.net. That's strongwealth.net. Strong Wealth, wealth management for Bitcoiners by Bitcoiners. Well, Christopher, we're here to talk about your business OpenAgents, as well as getting your insight just in general when it comes to Bitcoin and AI. Those are those are definitely two of the most exciting places right now of development, and you find yourself there in the middle. Could you share with us a little bit about OpenAgents?
Sure. So I call OpenAgents an applied AI lab, building both infrastructure and products for the agentic economy, specifically on open protocols. And the sort of impetus for the idea came from watching actually the Dev Day presentation in December 2023 from OpenAI, where Sam Altman unveiled their kind of vision for the future, which revolved around agents. I came to agree that agents will be a very extremely important sort of economic unit of the future, that there will be an agentic economy. And I just didn't like their approach. They mentioned also they were going to do a GPT store, this kind of like store for people to create these, basic versions of agents and earn revenue sharing from that. And that's where I knew, like, they're going to half-ass this. They're not going to do that properly. They're just structurally not able to, because they're not going to build on Bitcoin and be comfortable building these sort of like decentralized marketplaces that are open to any participant. And this had been my background. My previous startup was a gig marketplace startup building rideshare and kind of delivery networks in different regulatory jurisdictions. I was like, here is where the decentralized technology of Bitcoin could be a big advantage. And there probably should be like a company that focuses just on this. So I had an existing company at that point that I kind of pivoted to focus on agents. We renamed the company to OpenAgents. And the day after that, I recorded, video one of what's now a 150 plus video series of me building different pieces of this over time, over the last year plus now, different product releases that we've put out, things that we've learned from that. But OpenAgents is really like, the core of it is, what if we took this idea of like a research and product studio for the AI economy, but like being actually open instead of just saying that we're open, and taking advantage of the unique, I think, strategic advantages that allows.
Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit more about what your vision is for the agentic economy, what that would look like?
Well, the bet is that there will be multiple billions of agents everywhere throughout all society. I mean, and to kind of drive that point home, you've got, just look at the humanoid robotics market, where Elon Musk with Tesla and Optimus he's trying to manufacture 1 billion humanoids per year, like in the next decade. So let's just say that there's going to be 10 billion humanoids at some point in the next 10 to 15 years. Before that point, the equivalent of that, not for hardware, but for software, what we call AI agents, are going to proliferate first. Like that's the first thing that like everyone's going to have to grapple with. Agents are everywhere. By everywhere, I mean every probably person, family, business, household, street corner, mobile device, business, everything is going to have one or more agentic processes running as part of it. And let's like pause to define agent. Plenty of people have their own definitions, and this is kind of like something that no one really agrees on for a particular definition. I like to keep things simple and say that it's like a software process that does what you ask it to. There's a lot of people that kind of emphasize with this AI ecosystem, we're building AGI or building some like unique life form. And there's a lot of kind of, weird cultishness around it that I'm trying to steer away from and be, practical. This is something that fundamentally improves human agency. If the kinds of things that you can do, some subset of them, particularly in your business world, can be delegated to an agent, and you can have 10 different coding agents live, or you can have people monitoring your email, whatever. Like it's about fundamentally empowering the individual human within that. But if we think about what is this agentic economy, like I believe fundamentally that this has to be built on a foundation of openness. If you have multiple billions of these agents and the majority of them are controlled by these closed source mega corporations with connections to government, with there's a whole bunch of people or a subset of very high level people that are excited about applying AI technology to surveillance, and people are going to be on their best behavior. Like there's a lot of like potentially dystopian applications of the technology. And I think that if the sort of culture of the AI ecosystem is okay with it being controlled by these massive closed source corporations, you're going to get a lot of that. But if the ethos shifts towards a more decentralized, open, things are expected to be transparent, I think a lot of that bad behavior gets a lot harder to pull off or get away with. So we're trying to build the foundational infrastructure and products for that economy on a neutral and open foundation.
And does decentralized mean self-hosted necessarily? Not necessarily. What does that look like? It seems like that would be the safest way to go, but what are your thoughts there? I don't know how practical that would be for everyone to do.
Part of the beauty of a system that is open source, like Linux as a parallel, is it allows for a wide range of uses. So if you are that hobbyist or power user, you can always run Linux on your home machine. I've got my Linux computer sitting next to me. You can peel it apart, modify it however you want, and have a lot more, guarantees about what it's actually doing than your kind of like black box proprietary versions like Windows. But you can also build on top of Linux things like Mac OS. That's a more curated consumer experience. But Linux is the innovation that allows for all these kinds of things. And so if we look at that kind of parallel between Windows, Mac, and Linux, I think you're going to see a parallel in the agent space where, Microsoft is still the Microsoft. They're still the Windows. They're investing in, they own 49% of OpenAI, or like we like to call them, closed AI, GitHub and Minecraft. And they're trying to build their empire in their particular way. You've got a lot of, on the other hand, open source hobbyists and people, taking the latest models from DeepSeek or wherever and running with them. That's cool. But we do think there should be a middle layer that is the sort of equivalent of Mac OS that is built on that open foundation, but can then still smooth down some of the rough edges that might scare off consumers. And in the space of AI agents, I think that space is wide open, and that's where we're trying to position OpenAgents.
Mm-hmm. So as far as your current and future offerings from OpenAgents, what do those look like? What can people be expecting in the coming year or so?
Yeah, in the short term, we're focused on our first kind of use case that we've identified that customers are willing to pay thousands of dollars per month for, which are coding agents, kind of a drop-in remote worker focused on software development. This, we think, is going to help kind of bootstrap a broader marketplace where just imagine that we have an agent that's really great at a lot of things, but it's not as great at a particular type of data source or whatever, where we can then incentivize a plugin developer who has some unique expertise or insight for them to be able to create a plugin that the agent can then use, and they get a little share of that revenue. I think once we get that solidly in place for coding agents, that's going to let us broaden the aperture of what the agents do. And we want to get to the point where, fundamentally, this end up will be a consumer play where we want anybody to be able to have their own personal agent or way to command agents, which we're going to do through a mobile app. Plenty of people think that you'll want to carry around some other device, or they're not. We are strong believers in use the hardware that everyone is already paying for, that's in their pocket, that has had literally all of the technology that you would want. I guess you could say in some ways we're going to be competing with Apple on that. I think that their rollout so far with Apple Intelligence have been very underwhelming. I don't think they have the product sense to lead in this. We'll see if that changes. But, I think anybody should be able to install our mobile app. We have an app in development right now called Onyx in open beta. It's still kind of focused on developers. That's the kind of tools that it has. But over the next few months, that'll be increasingly, open-ended and generic. So to sum up, we're doing two interfaces. We're doing a web application kind of for power users, where if you want to, click and spin up an agent and kind of see it work and the kind of data streams, that'll be available at openagents.com. Or you can click to download Onyx, which is very simple. We're envisioning that as your personal AI, kind of like Jarvis from Tony Stark. You just got your thing that listens to you, you talk to it, and it does stuff for you. The does stuff for you is, it could be a coding agent. It could be literally anything from this kind of decentralized agent marketplace that we're building on these open protocols, where you don't have to care about all the wiring and all the stuff that's happening in the background. You're just able to ask it to do stuff for you, and it does. If you ask it to do something that it can't already do, that's going to open up a little job ticket where it's okay, these 10 people requested this particular thing. We will pay half a Bitcoin for someone who can implement this, or maybe way less than half a Bitcoin. But
Sure.
This will evolve over time in accordance with user demands. But I think that's one thing that I think OpenAgents will uniquely have, is that marketplace. I don't see anyone really taking seriously this idea of network effect. What is going to set companies apart? Obviously, there's a race to the bottom of commoditization for the base level of models. There's what seems to be an increasing understanding that the battle is going to be more at the application layer. And the sort of excitement from the regular normie VCs seems to be around this concept of vertical agent companies, companies that specialize in one particular vertical, and they get very good at kind of automating those processes through AI agents. That's kind of like the consensus view of the people in Silicon Valley and such. I take a different view on that. That type of company, vertical agents, reminds me of the old Uber for X company, where people took the idea of Uber and tried to apply it to all these different things. And 5-10 years later, you'd be hard pressed to come up with a real success story of those Uber for X type companies. Maybe there's a couple. Uber is still there. So it's in the realm of agents, what is that kind of big daddy market hegemon going to be? I think OpenAgents has a potential to be that. And it's ideally, it should be both horizontal and vertical. And how we get away with that is by starting by nailing one use case. Coding agents is what we're focused on, because it has wide applicability, both for our team as well as businesses that we're starting to work with, and enterprises all are going to want that kind of drop-in software engineer. But like I said, to be able to kind of open that up through this marketplace where we're able to incentivize a broad array of developers and service providers to help contribute to extending the capabilities of the OpenAgents platform, where they don't need to care about distribution because we have a sales team that generates those contracts with businesses. We get paid by the business. We pay out, cuts to the agent developers. So in that respect, we want to be paying developers the most. I think that's how we build a thriving ecosystem. And then that network effect of, if we have the best developers, we're building the best agents. Where are people going to go to get the best agents? They're going to come to OpenAgents. And we've got the best name. It's OpenAgents. Of course you want OpenAgents. You don't want agents that hide their thinking like closed AI. No, you want open agents, right?
So then when it comes to Onyx, what will that cost? I'm guessing that's primarily going to be consumer facing, just the average person would be using Onyx. What does that cost?
We hope for Onyx to be free. At least the base version. Certainly, there will be a base version that is free, and you can start to see, because of the economics have been changing, where now like OpenAI has been able to offer GPT-4 Mini for free. DeepSeek has been offering their model for free, although their services are getting slammed. So there's got to be some gating. But I think, a year or two from now, when we think Onyx will be really going viral among those kinds of consumer audiences, that the models could be just good enough that we can just give away really powerful functionality for free, including running some devices on the edge. Like we shipped a couple kind of test versions where we had Llama 3.2 1B or 3B model running on the device itself. Like, we don't need to charge for that. It's using your own battery power. There will be other opportunities to kind of monetize, like if someone wants to pay to upgrade to something. So we'll experiment with that. But hopefully the business side of OpenAgents, enterprise facing, that's where our revenue comes from, and then we're just able to kind of use the consumer app for lead gen and other kinds of opportunities.
Yeah. So while people are waiting for Onyx, what would be your recommendation today for an AI agent? What the average person, what would you recommend that they use?
The average person, I would say like using existing basic tools that everyone talks about, like ChatGPT, until you chafe against it to the point where you're like, I really wanted to do this thing, but it can't. That's where you want to start looking for other things. And for most people, maybe the base level ChatGPT like meets your needs and you're fine with that. I would say that if you're a business and you have trouble hiring developers, or you're just looking for more cost efficiency in your development team, software engineering team, that's where you should reach out to me and OpenAgents, because we are working with people and companies like that. Get way more bang for the buck than humans alone. For kind of most people, I'd say use what's out there. If you have, pain points that you have that you identify, please tweet them at us at OpenAgents Inc. We're actively looking for what are those things that OpenAI and the other labs are not doing so well. It's a moving target. But the hope is that by, February to March, we have the infrastructure in place such that anything that anybody requests, like I'm asking my Onyx to do something for me, if it's not doable right away, it gets turned into a ticket that someone then, builds, and it's going to be the fastest evolving product I think that's out there.
So for devs, when it comes to pricing and quality, how would you compare your current product to OpenAI, for instance?
Well, OpenAI, on their like $20 and $200 a month products, they are losing money on that. So I think there's a level of loss leading that they're just able to do because they're burning Microsoft's piles of money that we can't do.
Sure.
I have been happy for my day-to-day usage paying Claude even $50 to $100 per day sometimes, because I'm getting the equivalent of thousands of dollars that I would otherwise pay an engineer. So I do think the kind of per usage based pricing makes a lot of sense, where we can take, particularly if it's a model like DeepSeek, which is like literally 95% cheaper than Sonnet for 95% of the quality. Per usage pricing makes sense. That a bunch of the developers that we've worked with have been happy to buy $20 or $100 worth of credits. And I'm confident, particularly as prices continue to come down, if you're able to engage in an interface and you're able to spend $5 of compute to get, a pull request or 5 pull requests done, and that saves you hours of your time, developers who know how to value their time are going to see the value in that very, very quickly.
Yeah. So you mentioned DeepSeek. What are your initial thoughts? It's been out for a few days. Is it kind of a sea change, or is it overhyped? What are initial thoughts?
It may be overhyped, and a lot of stuff in AI is. I think it's revolutionary, and I'm coming at it from a particular angle where I'm spending X amount on Claude. Our Claude has been the main model that all of our products have used for the last 6 months. We've been for the last 18 months in this kind of bouncing between OpenAI, Claude 3 came out, GPT-4, Claude 3.5. 3.5 has been the best for the last 6 months for what we do, which is primarily coding agents, but it can be expensive. And so here comes a model that is 95% cheaper for 95% of the intelligence. And even though in some cases maybe you would want to use the smarter model, generally, and this is our current engineering effort, is we're stripping Sonnet out of every part of our system and replacing it with more of a kind of a compound system where instead of just one call to Sonnet, we'll make a couple calls to DeepSeek and kind of more smartly build the context. So at least in our initial experimentation, this leads to a way smarter result. In the end, it's smarter and cheaper. Takes a little bit more work to get there. So from my perspective, just from that dimension where it's something finally I can rip out because it's more cost efficient, in addition to the platform risk is gone of being turned off by Anthropic or their APIs are not available. I can use DeepSeek's API. I can use it's hosted a bunch of different other places. I learned just in the last day that you can deploy it, the full version of R1, not even the smaller condensed version, the full version of R1 to Hugging Face for $200 per day, or you can build a rig to run it yourself for $6,000 a month. I was like, all right, maybe it's time we raise some money a little bit because I want to run one of those R1 rigs sitting next to me. How cool would that be? And then maybe we'll connect that out to let other people use it. But like, it's remarkable on a whole different slew of things. But we finally have reached the point that those of us inside of the sort of the open source AI community have been hoping for a long time, which is a model that is at least at par with the leading state-of-the-art closed source models, that is open, that we can run at home. And the fact that they've caught up now, it's remarkable because you can just think about now all of the people that are able to fine-tune that in different ways or build derivatives of it, that it just unlocks this whole new level of innovation. Not possible with the closed models. In addition to that, DeepSeek, because it is so transparent about its thought process, I mean, this has been a major thing that a lot of AI developers have complained about OpenAI, which is they're paying $200 a month for O1 or O1 Pro, and you're paying for this model you're paying for it to do all this thinking. And sometimes you'll sit there for 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes while it's thinking. It doesn't really tell you what it's thinking. You get little like very bare bones summaries. But with DeepSeek, you get the full, all of the reasoning, all of its thought process, you get all of it. Now, OpenAI has their kind of like fearful, reasons for hiding that because they know that as soon as they release that, it makes it that much easier to kind of build models that can do better than what they have. But that's a major obstacle for OpenAI. If they're trying to build trust among businesses, particularly as it's going to be, you're basically in some ways trusting the provider of the model, the provider of the agent that, okay, I'm hiring you to, I'm hiring these agentic processes from you, or I'm building agentic processes that I'm going to, run large parts of my business. And you're not even going to tell me how the model's trained. I can't reproduce any of this. I can't see what happens when I hit your API. And then all this additional stuff I'm paying for the thinking, you're not going to share that with me. I know, but over here I can get all of that and not sacrifice quality. I think they're in a tough spot. I wouldn't want to be them. It's a good time to be building an open source because we're no longer running to catch up. We may power past them. In some things we are powering past them because there's a whole slew of businesses that just cannot run OpenAI. They can't use their API because they can't have their data leave their premises. And so maybe you've got some people that'll come in and do kind of custom. There's companies, one or two companies that'll, they'll send people on site to help build you something custom. But just that ability to know what you're running, to be able to inspect it, modify it. We need that. We need that sort of Linux equivalent to the closed source, Windows approach. And then we just want to build a nice experience for people to that. That's the Apple of that.
Yeah. So some people have tried to position this as USA versus China. It sounds like it's a win of open source over closed source. Is that the better way of looking at it?
Yes, I do think so. And, certainly there's geopolitical considerations. I'll actually just read my tweet here. I tweeted at David Sachs, the new AI and crypto czar. He was talking about DeepSeek and that the AI race will be competitive. US, China, etc. And my response was, hopefully the closed AI labs fail in their attempts at regulatory capture, and that y'all can balance across both dimensions, US versus China and open versus closed. I'm seeing way too many calls for closing or restricting AI further. It's the wrong approach, and the US has to lead on open source AI or else. There's some kind of analysis around, why players that are behind might cynically embrace open source to get a strategic edge and undermine the competitors. And people have speculated that like Meta is taking that approach because they've been behind. And like, who knows if Zuck is like actually on the side of open source. So you're right to be skeptical about that. In the case of Wenfeng Liang, forgive me for mangling his name, but the CEO of DeepSeek, read I think Forbes piece. Someone did a profile on him. He's just some nerd who actually really cares about open source, and like he's building an open source company. It happens to be in China. So I view DeepSeek as allies. I see them as on team open. And I hope that lessons that policymakers in the US take from this is not that we need to close down, that we needed to strike more of these kind of crony capitalist relationships with companies like, you've already got some of the best funded companies in the space are actively lobbying for regulatory capture. There's a bunch of that during the Biden administration, the tail end of the Biden administration, where it was clear that like they were going to work with essentially OpenAI and Anthropic. Essentially, that's it to build this kind of de facto government sanctioned monopoly that's been blown wide open by Trump's election. But you still have day 2 of Trump's administration, Sam Altman, closed AI guy up there talking about building Stargate for OpenAI only. What? I guess it's all private money, theoretically, even though there's some skepticism about if that's actually there. Elon has poured cold waters on that, saying that they don't actually have the money. So how much of that was just PR and aspirational? We don't know yet. They do have Oracle, I guess, has a data center being built in Abilene that's been underway for a while. So that's sort of like phase 1 of Stargate. But, clarity has come out after that like they're building this for OpenAI. So this is not like a neutral, like even America first kind of thing. This is an OpenAI first kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And if OpenAI has the issues that OpenAI has, as well as some, skepticism, given Altman also has been issuing a altcoin, you'd say, to like harvest people's biometric data. There's some concerns about like what they are actually seeing is the future of this technology. Altman would probably love to preside over the AI utopia / dystopia, but I don't think that should be the structure at all. It should be more decentralized. It should be more open. I hope that America can lead in that, because the openness is really in line with the principles of America. It's just whether some kind of crony capitalist people have financial incentive to have the U.S. Choose winners and keep out the rest, which unfortunately happens a lot in other industries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like Stargate has really been undermined by DeepSeek, or at least the main thrust of Stargate. Like, I still think it's important to have a lot of money behind AI, but if it's all going, or if it was all going to OpenAI right now, I feel like OpenAI is just looking sort of foolish.
Well, I think so too, and it's if you have people who have financial incentive for the kind of basic version 1 NVIDIA driven bubble to keep going up, and that particular model of spending all this money on the latest NVIDIA stuff that's gotten them X amount of returns, and maybe that'll linearize, but like having some insights of resource constrained people in China coming up with, an innovative approach that just maximizes efficiency and like starts undercutting those narratives. I just see all of that as a good thing. There's definitely too much hype and too much bubble type behavior. Returning to reality, particularly recognitions that open source is actually like really important thing to embrace actively. I think that's all bullish.
Now, I know with the app, DeepSeek has been rewriting some of its answers. Is there that type of action when it comes to using the open source version, or is that something they're imposing on themselves within the app only?
Anyone who has an app in an app store sanctioned by a government is going to have things like that, where they're kind of kowtowing to the existing government. ChatGPT has the equivalent. Every app in the app store has the equivalent. There's content moderation policies that have to be in place. You don't have to use the app. You can take the underlying model. And companies like Perplexity have already shown that you can not only deploy the underlying model, which even though it doesn't have the aggressive content moderation, it still has certain things it was trained on and not trained on, but that can be augmented or overridden. And I saw something like Perplexity had deployed a version where they actually they did some surgery on the model to remove some of the, they did something where if you ask their R1 Perplexity thing about Tiananmen or any of these sensitive topics, it gives you straight answers. Now, does it give you straight answers about the US equivalent of stuff that they might want you to say? They're a US, every company based in a jurisdiction is going to have some level of that. And then the question is, do you have access to the underlying model weights so you can put it where you want and do what you want, where people around the globe can kind of share in this new technology innovation that's going on? I think that's beneficial. I don't think it's beneficial for one country to get a massive dominant edge over everything else. Hopefully everyone has access to the same capacities, more or less. And they're just kind of a, I don't know. Maybe we need an AI version of mutually assured destruction. Everyone's got the latest AGI in their pocket. Everyone, including governments, are on best behavior because we've all got really high agency and let's not destroy each other. I don't know.
Yeah. So I want to turn to interoperability and open protocols a little bit more before we finish up the interview. First of all, speak to, if you would, how Bitcoin plays into this. Is it primarily because it's an open protocol, or are there some additional benefits to Bitcoin and AI? And then maybe what are some ways that you've seen that interoperability at work so far between OpenAgents and other companies?
Yeah, I'd say step one is agents are going to be transacting value. What are they going to be transacting value with? Are they going to have their own bank accounts? Maybe. I'm sure there's a company or two that's trying to get agents their own bank accounts. That sounds horrible to me. These are internet native software processes. They should have internet native money. We have that with Bitcoin. Are agents going to be transacting in the latest crypto Chuck E. Cheese token of the day? Probably not, even though there's a whole bunch of crypto people trying very hard on that. I just fundamentally don't think so. I think agents, like people, when given a choice between being paid in the hardest asset, the soundest money ever, or a Chuck E. Cheese token, or a devaluing dollar, they're going to choose Bitcoin. And regardless of whether Bitcoin, the currency, is what's used, or Bitcoin, the rails, where you have companies like Lightning Labs and Lightspark building sort of Bitcoin-based assets using the Lightning Network as transport. So you can envision all sorts of different Bitcoin-based assets like dollars or Tether being transacted by agents. And this is something that I hope OpenAgents supports, the kind of full range of Bitcoin-based financial assets as things that are easily traded by agents. But it's got to be that. It's got to use the Lightning Network. It's got to use things that are instant and internet native and global and neutral and open to all people. That's going to bring the friction between payments down to zero. And so I think fundamentally that's going to win, and also should be a large driver, I think, of Bitcoin adoption. If you want to participate maximally in the Bitcoin economy or in the agent economy, you're going to ideally want your Bitcoin wallet. Sure, we'll take your fiat money, but we're going to charge you 5% or use Bitcoin, and it's freer. And so that interoperability built into the increasing consensus that Bitcoin is the logical choice for agents means that any company that's building agents that take Bitcoin, we're already default interoperable. I can buy stuff from them using that money. And then the other piece is just the data. There's starting to be open protocols, even from closed labs like Anthropic. Hats off to them for doing at least one positive thing for open protocols. They released a protocol called Model Context Protocol that people are starting to use to kind of equip agents with a way to consume services. A good start. But fundamentally, I think if agents are able to also share the same language such that let's just say there's one kind of global liquidity pool of services or data that an agent can draw on. And okay, this data source will cost me a little bit of Satoshis, or this service will cost me a little bit of this, but there's no reason why there shouldn't be some open, neutral, decentralized registries of all these agent kind of plugins and things. And I'd say that's the big kind of centerpiece of the coordination that's happened so far between us and a number of other companies building on Bitcoin and AI, or building at this intersection of Bitcoin and AI, which is, okay, like we all kind of recognize that there should be this shared registry. We've got some people building kind of like the L402 piece that connects all this to the Lightning Network. Some people are building more of like the business registry or the APIs. I'm writing some like Nostr specifications that can kind of tie all this together on the Nostr protocol for the data communication. And it's just everyone's kind of building their own piece, and we all have incentive to kind of meet in the middle, because once we have 2, 3, 4, 5 of the leading agent projects speaking the same language, participating in a shared marketplace, the next wave of startups is going to want to participate in that. So we're going to be building this thing that snowballs. Is that going to happen from VC-backed companies that all have their own incentive and no incentive to cooperate? Probably not. Is it going to happen from crypto people that all have their own token and no incentive to cooperate? Probably not. I think you're going to see this real sort of like Bitcoin AI, ecosystem evolve massively over the next 12 months, particularly as, and this is the main thing that I'm focused on, is like, what is the revenue source? What is the thing that people are going to want to pay for so that we get real commerce happening? That is our initial focus on coding agents, in part because it's just a problem that I understand as a developer, been coding for 30 years, and the bulk of my business just requires a lot of software development, and that's what I've been kind of focused on for the last 18 months, is how can we build agents that not just maximize developer productivity, but maximize like a business's productivity and going from 0 to 1, from like I have an idea to I have a product that I can test in the marketplace. To be able to bring the speed of iteration to the absolute maximum is going to be a big competitive advantage for anyone building in this direction. Once we have the kind of revenue sources, we've had some success with early customers that we work closely with, businesses paying us, a few $100s or a few $1,000s per month to kind of get a sense of what their needs are, pairing that with these coding agents, gradually opening that up into more of a marketplace. Down the road, we do hope to see OpenAgents as sort of this one-stop shop for AI agents, where you don't need to think about any of the like underlying stuff. You don't care. It's just the place you go. You can slap down the credit card, call up, talk to our sales team, whatever that is, or use your own version of it, and just have all of the best agents at your disposal. For most people, the end goal here is that we want to have 8 billion people on the planet having a mobile phone where they just open it up, they can say what they want, and just like literally magic happens, because all this stuff happens in the background.
Very cool. Well, any final thoughts you have for the listeners before we finish up today, as well as where can people go if they want to give OpenAgents a try or keep up with what you're doing?
I'd say, please, we're very active on X. Follow us. OpenAgents Inc. is the Twitter. You can go to openagents.com. We have status updates about what we're building, as well as download links for our open beta of our mobile app called Onyx. And then in the next week or two, we're going to be rolling out the new version of our kind of power user web dashboard for people to be able to interact with agents, targeted mostly first at developers. If you are a business owner and you're interested in getting agents into your business, we're happy to work with you more personally. You can contact us through the website. And stay tuned.
Great. Christopher, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Josh, thank you.
Well, friends, it's a wrap. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Business Bitcoinization Show. If you want to reach out to either me or Christopher, you can find those links down in the show notes. And if Onyx or coding agents sounds interesting to you, check out those as well. As always, keep building, keep growing, and until next time, keep living and leading well. Thanks to those who have been supporting the show on Fountain in recent days. The boost of the week goes to John Gordon, who sent a comment about last week's episode with Dr. Roger Mochagemba. He said, great conversation to understand the benefits of bringing Bitcoin into healthcare. Loved hearing my client, Dr. Roger, explain the synergy between the direct primary care model and Bitcoin. He was early to telemedicine, DPC, and now Bitcoin adoption. If you're around San Antonio and need a doc, check him out. Shout out for making it easy for independent docs to integrate Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. I appreciate the sats, John, and thank you for the good work you do as well. And if you also would like to support the show, feel free to listen on Fountain and either stream sats as you listen or send a boost. And if you send a boost with a comment, I'll plan to read it on the show.